Ohio State played their spring game yesterday in front of a smooth 80,000 people in the shoe. It's only a spring game. We're not making definitive statements on what Ohio State's going to be in 2024. But even with that being said, they played 11-on-11 football. What did we learn? A little bit of I guess quarterback battle is the word you would use. We'll talk about that. Caleb Downs, his first time in Ohio State uniform. That was fun to see. Jeremiah Smith is out here catching crazy comparisons within the first 15 minutes of the broadcast. We'll talk about all that right now. But first things first, Ohio State fans, if you've just now found this channel or just now found this show, The Hard Count, welcome. You can clearly tell we're a little bit sick about this game, college football, because we're doing a spring game reaction. So the bottom line here is you found your home for college football year-round. Make sure you're subscribed. Also follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at JD Piquel. I want to know what y'all thought about this spring game. Final score, depending on how you count that very last play, 34-33, 34-36 for those of y'all that saw that as a pick six to end the game. The thing that I was watching, the thing that everybody was watching was how do these quarterbacks look now? How do these young guns look? And how does some of these maybe newer faces that aren't so young guns look? Specifically a Will Howard, because he transferred over from Kansas State, brings the experience, brings the mobility, and he didn't exactly light it up. Saw some good, saw some not so good, didn't lead a touchdown drive. Again, we're going back to this being practice 15. It's a game-like scenario, so you don't just brush it off and say no big deal, but at the same time, you're like, all right, we're taking the whole spring into account for the staff here, and us as fans only get to see that practice 15 on a national level. I know they had the open practice to the students, but still, we're not trying to overanalyze one practice from Will Howard. You saw some good things. Also worth noting, he took the first reps with the ones, so read into that as much as you want to. Devin Brown, man, I don't know if he'll win the job. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but led a scoring drive, and I just think he's got kind of that it factor to him a little bit here, man. Whenever he's out there behind center, there is a certain amount of a big play's about to happen feeling. Just for me at home, maybe you felt different watching it, but when I was watching 33, I was like, all right, he's got some moxie, he's got some gunslinger to him, maybe too much gunslinger to him for the staff's liking. Maybe it's why he hasn't been the starter for the last couple of seasons, but I'm just saying, now Devin Brown, I liked what I saw in smaller doses. Same thing as we said with Will Howard. You saw some up and down, but I appreciated the fact that he led that scoring drive. Nice little throw on the RPO. Julian Sayin really has kind of been the dark horse of this whole thing because he transferred, I put in air quotes. He was at Alabama for a cup of coffee as an early enrollee. Then he goes and transfers after Nick Saban retires to Ohio State. And he has some juice now. I think when you watched Julian Sayin yesterday, you saw all the reasons to be excited. Ball pops out of his hand quickly. He's got some wiggle to him as well when the play breaks down. He's able to create with his legs. But at the end of the day, he looked a lot like what he was, a really talented true freshman playing in front of 80,000 people on national television for the first time. And also, it doesn't help anybody that the wind was a factor yesterday, and it was hard to throw through that gust of wind. It led to Julian Sayin having some throws that he would like to have back. Aaron Nolan led some scoring drives in the second half. I don't expect him, by nature, how they divvied up those reps, to be in the mix for a starting role. Lincoln Keenholz had a couple of poor decisions, but still you see the juice with him. Let's be real about this here. Will Howard transferred from Kansas State to Ohio State to start. I think if we're going to give this staff and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly some truth serum, I think they'd probably lean that way. I think if you asked Will Howard, he didn't come there to, compete all the way tooth and nail down to the very last week before the game to be announced a starter, though we'll see how that whole thing plays out. I think Will Howard's the guy until he's not. Maybe that's unfair to Devin Brown, but I think that's the world we're living in. People talk about Will Howard being like a Kyle McCord 2.0. I think yesterday, even just the way he was creating with his legs in certain situations should prove that that's not the case. And that's not me dunking on Kyle McCord. I just look at Will Howard and how much experience he has under his belt. Guys won a Big 12 championship. Guy brings the mobility factor that maybe you didn't have last year with number 6. It's a different game. It's a different game when he's playing quarterback for you than it was a season ago. But when we look at who else could be in the mix here, again, I like Julian Sayin's his talent, not his experience. That's the thing he has working against him, I suppose. I look at Devin Brown and how he would win the job. And I would say if 33 does end up being your guy for game one, there'd be this feeling of like, hey, well, what did Will Howard do to lose the job? And I understand where that thought would come from. But I think with Devin Brown, if he finds a way to win this job during fall camp, like, it means he's taken off. It means he made it impossible for this staff to name anybody else the starter. It means this dude straight up balled behind closed doors. So, again, I know there's a lot that's going to happen here when the portal opens up and players are going to shift and who knows how this whole thing's going to work with their timeline of naming a starter. I'm sure Ryan Day will be a clear communicator. I'm not implying anybody's going to transfer. I'm just trying to make sure we're discussing this as much in real time as possible. But Devin Brown, if he wins the job and this thing goes into fall camp and he has himself a fall camp and a half, that would, I think, be reassuring in some ways for Buckeye fans that, okay, Devin Brown flipped the switch. So it is what it is. Bottom line, this quarterback room, what we saw yesterday, and from what we've known about this group since really the beginning of spring football, there is too much talent in that room for them not to have an answer at quarterback. The cream will rise. At some point in time, somebody's going to take over, grab this job by the throat, and be the guy. I truly believe that, so I wouldn't be overwhelmingly concerned by the things that you weren't pleased with in Ohio State's spring scrimmage yesterday. Now, what I will say is there's a couple of things working in favor that we saw yesterday in Ohio State's spring game for whoever ends up being QB1. The first is Chip Kelly knows what he's doing, man. He does. Like, if you look at his track record, his resume, it speaks for itself. The quarterbacks he's worked with, and not to be a Debbie Downer, maybe that's the wrong phrase, but like Chip Kelly has done more with quarterbacks that are of a lesser caliber throwing the football downfield-wise than what they have in that room right now. The other part of this, the skill that Ohio State has, both in that running back room, at the wide receiver position, is an embarrassment of riches. It's going to make whoever QB1 is, to make their job a lot easier. Tell you what, it's hard to go wrong handing the ball to Travion Henderson, checking it down to Quinshon Judkins, throwing the ball to a Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka just being an absolute psychopath yesterday with that one-handed grab on the sideline. Just a little reminder like, oh yeah, remember me? I'm a 1,000-yard receiver when I'm healthy. He's a boss in every sense of the word. He is going to be, I believe, at least to start the year wide receiver one. Now, that's not to say anything negative about Jeremiah Smith. He's a true freshman. He's been on campus for all of, a class and a half at this point, I suppose. It was very obvious, even though he didn't have that, highlight Sports Center kind of play that you would have liked to see him have, that you've seen him have on social media throughout the course of the spring. It was very obvious how that staff felt about him. There was a point during that broadcast where Ryan Day is talking to either the guys upstairs or is talking to Joel Klatt on the field, and he's telling them as they call the play in the red zone, he goes, watch this. And it's a 50-50 ball to Jeremiah Smith. And they went another 50-50 ball to Jeremiah Smith a little bit later in that drive, I think, too. And they didn't complete those. It didn't happen how you would have liked it to happen. But the amount of confidence Ryan Day called that play with and the amount of clear effort they had to try and get the ball to number 4 in that kind of red zone situation should tell us a lot about the spring he's had and the role he's going to have this fall. And Ryan Day was also clear during that whole back and forth during the game. He's like, hey, listen, man, we're not going to try and overrun 4 too much here. Like, you can be special. It's kind of the sentiment everybody in Columbus provided throughout the course of this spring and throughout the course of that spring game. Now, one thing to say, too, throughout this spring game, like, quarterbacks aren't live, so it's tough to get a gauge for what they bring with their legs. But it was tough to get a gauge for the offense, period, because of how good that defense is, man. That's a top 5 defense in the country that sprinkled in Caleb Downs, the top player from the transfer portal who was a freshman All-American last year. Like, it's okay if you're not scoring 40 in your spring game, it's a top 5 defense. Like, it just kind of is what it is. When you have a defense that's that good, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a curve that you grade your offense on. We saw a lot of checkdowns yesterday. I don't think that was on accident. I think a lot of that was speaking to how good the coverage was on the back end in this Jim Knowles defense. They weren't even at full strength yesterday. Caleb Downs is still getting his legs under him. How good is he going to be when you give him a full summer to learn the defense even more in-depthly and gets to fall camp to rep it even further? Hard to not be excited about that defense. Hard to not be excited when you see number 2 out there playing safety for you. I understand this defense was already elite without him, but you add a player of his caliber into that thing, and they're going to be scary. They're going to be absolutely terrifying. So at the end of the day, in this spring game, man. It felt like just got a lot of things confirmed for us. Ohio State, is the quarterback room perfect? No, they're still trying to find a starter. Is there obvious juice there? Of course. That running back room, really, really good. Wide receiver room, really, really good. Defense, they're going to be elite. And you try not to take too much from a spring game, but when you look at this thing from an overarching perspective, if you tighten the screws a little bit on some of those areas, offensive line maybe specifically you're looking at closely when it comes to when that second portal window opens up, and if you can upgrade it all there, this is a playoff team. This is a playoff team, and that, to me right now, feels like the floor. Get a couple of things right and check some boxes in a way you would like to in Columbus. If Will Howard or a Devin Brown, again, I think it's Will Howard until it's not. If you hit at quarterback how I think you can in this situation, with that offense, with that skill, with that defense, like, there is one mission for them, and they've made it clear it's national title or bust. But still, it was fun to see the spring game yesterday, see them run around a little bit, and get a quick peek at that 2024 campaign for the good folks in Columbus. Make sure you're subscribed. Again, get at me on social media, Instagram and Twitter. Let me know on there how y'all feel and what you saw yesterday in the shoe. Love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling as always, and we will see y'all next time.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.